Well, hey guys, the Abomination of Desolation, such a hot topic in eschatology. And, as I've mentioned before, when I started to immerse myself in the Word of God and try to figure out what's going on here, I reached out to every resource, the world, friends, family, the world being Google, the internet, denominational churches, whatever. And I said, hey, it looks to me like this Abomination of Desolation is a big deal. What is all this about? So the mainstream teaching on the Abomination of Desolation is it's a future event in our future that's tied to the Antichrist entering into a third temple in Jerusalem, and that temple doesn't currently exist, and defiling the temple or breaking a promise to modern day Israel, geopolitical nation of Israel, or something like that. And then that is called the Abomination of Desolation when that occurs, and that triggers the tribulation or the rapture or some combination thereof. That's what I found when I reached out to the world and said, hey, what does all this mean? So like I've mentioned on these other examples of where the world said something, but then I would go to the scriptures and I couldn't get the scriptures to line up with the world. Same thing here. I kept studying the Abomination of Desolation, and I was like, well, wait a minute though. This isn't making any sense. So let me give you some specific examples of where what the world taught me about it doesn't make sense with scriptures. So in Matthew 24, at the very end of 23, let's start with that. After Christ just eviscerates the Jews on what an abomination they are to him, he says to them, and he's in the temple, okay? And he says to them, behold, your house is left unto you desolate, okay? And then he leaves the temple, and he's standing out around there with his disciples, and he says, look at all this here. It's all going to be completely torn down. Nothing will be left that you can even recognize. And so they asked him 3 questions. They said, when will this happen? What shall be the sign of thy coming and of the end of the world? The end of the world is KJV, okay? So Jesus started to answer those 3 questions. Remember, he told them this is all going to be desolated, completely torn down. So I want to just jump to Matthew 24, 15 and 16. We'll stay focused on the Abomination of Desolation. So he's telling them what all this is going to look like. He's answering their questions, which is all of chapter 24 and 25. And he says, when ye therefore shall see the Abomination of Desolation spoken of by Daniel the prophet stand in the holy place, let them which be in Judea flee into the mountains. So he said to him, when you see the Abomination of Desolation, the people standing there right there with him at that moment. So I was like, oh, wait a minute. The world told me this is in the future, my future. But Christ was saying that these people standing with him right there, his disciples, would see the Abomination of Desolation. And he also was very specific about when they see it, let them in Judea flee to the mountains. I never figured how that could apply to me in the future, because I'm nowhere near Judea. So then I'm saying, okay, well, this is the desolation. Behold, your house is left unto you desolate. This is the desolation Christ is talking about. So you go over to Luke 21 and get there. Luke 21:20, Christ again talking to his disciples. And when you shall see Jerusalem compassed with armies, then know that the desolation thereof is nigh. So he's saying to them standing there, when you see armies all around Jerusalem, know this desolation is right now. It's going to happen right now. And he goes on to say again in Luke's account, let them which are in Judea flee to the mountains, let them which in the midst of it depart out. And he goes on. So I'm like, okay, again, he's talking, he says, you, and he says, when Jerusalem's encompassed with armies. So I was like, oh, well, everybody said that's in the future when all these nations attack modern day Israel. But wait, the Romans did this, encompassed Jerusalem in the Jewish-Roman War of 66 to 70 AD, when all this was destroyed. The temple was destroyed, the city completely destroyed. So I'm like, okay, that's not in my future, right? And then we've all been in Daniel here, starting out a little bit in Daniel. We haven't got to the part where it talks about the abomination of desolation. But we will in detail. And in Daniel 11:31, Daniel's prophecy, he's talking about this individual. He says, and arms shall stand on his part, and they shall pollute the sanctuary of strength, and shall take away the daily sacrifice, and they shall place the abomination that maketh desolate. So I was, okay. I read that and I was like, well, then this must be Daniel prophesying about this future Antichrist, because the world told me this is the guy that'll do all this in the future. But then as I kept studying Daniel, I saw that all of Daniel was fulfilled in the past. And we're going to dive into that in great detail. So guys, that's just another example of the world not lining up with the scriptures.